And now we will move into testing. So automatic, manual, licensed, or free of charge testing. And we would like to have our panelists on stage, and I see at least one of my panelists moving in the wrong direction. So if you could please go in this direction instead, that would be much better. Thank you. This is on. So there is no break between these two sessions, and we have the remote speakers checked and ready, so that's perfect. So in this session, we are going to talk about testing for Web Accessibility Directive compliance. That means all relevant EN requirements that we have talked about. And this, of course, doing this would come with enormous costs. And that's why the monitoring agencies do simplified and in-depth monitoring to do non-compliance testing with a larger number of websites and full testing with a smaller number of websites and so on and so forth. So we all know that automatic testing tools are good for some things, but not everything. It's easy to scale. But it doesn't cover all requirements, and especially not the EN requirements beyond WCAG. And sometimes some tools can also provide false positives and have other kind of critical issues. But on the other hand, if we go to the experts, the manual testing, they may be biased, or I mean, if you have two different testers, maybe they don't follow the same methodology, they come to different solutions or different results. And they can't possibly find everything on large websites because then that would cost a fortune to do. So, and also there's not enough experts around, at least not in Europe. So most of the member states, they used automatic tools for the simplified methodology. Some use it also for part of the in-depth testing methodology. And some member states have developed their own tools, and some member states have are not using automatic tools at all. So we have a very diverse perspective on this, or different aspects, and it's done differently in different countries, which I think is an interesting aspect and a good thing to discuss. And we also have quite a few from the industry who would say that you always need to do a combination of both, and really it's maybe not even necessary to have the licensed tool because there are so many good free tools out there. So trying to make sure that we cover all of these perspectives, we have a very nice panel set up here with Malin Hammarberg from the Funka Foundation with us on stage. And then from the US, we have Corbb O'Connor. Thanks for being here. I know it's in the middle of your night from Level Access. And then we have, and now I forgot to ask my Hungarian speaking colleague how to pronounce this, but Zsanett Ashu-Miskolczi or something, who is the head of office of the Compliance Control Office of the Hungarian Monitoring Agency. So you can introduce yourself and say your name, because I'm sure it's beautiful, but I cannot say it. So I would like to ask you, all three of you, how and when do you recommend to use automatic accessibility testing tools? If we start with you, Malin, you are kind of an auditor, not connected to the monitoring.
No, I think the best use of automatic tools is when we use them when we need a quick answer. So, and when the accessibility issue itself is fresh. So if we as a UX designer, for instance, test when we add, or a designer, when we add a new color, test the colors when we add it in the design system we are working on, instead of testing it afterward, we have sent it to development and it's already been developed, because then we are one step behind. So using the automatic tool that fits when we add something, I think makes perfect sense. So when you're a developer and before you deploy your code, test your code, because the things you have coded are fresh for you. So it's much easier to fix them when you are in the spot. Using the accessibility tool, I didn't say that, I'm sorry, automatic tool in the very end instead, and it catches tens of thousands of errors. That's not a good use, because that's just a long backlog that truly doesn't help the user. Also, I think looking from it from that perspective, that we should use the automatic tools when we need them. That also makes us use a diverse set of automatic tools because what fits the UX designer or the designer doesn't necessarily fit the content creator or the developer. So I think we need to accept that we use a variety of automatic tools and not rely on a single one. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So Corbb, you are representing a single one. So in this panel, at least, you're representing many things, but that is one of them. So how and when would you recommend to use automatic accessibility testing tools?
Yeah, thanks, Susanna. I think that the best time is to use them early and to use them often. And I think there is some value in using them throughout the entire development lifecycle. You know, and I think too, the question becomes less about which tool and more about when to use a tool. Because what we find is that a site that has, to your point, thousands of accessibility issues probably has thousands of manually detectable issues too. So there's a correlation between a site with a few issues having probably a decent-ish experience. It's not going to be perfect, may not be exact, right? But if we run that as a test to say, all right, I've got a large website. I don't know quite where my gaps are, but how can I prioritize? Well, I can start with automation. And if I start to fix the issues that I see as themes, if I realize, you know, and I'm not going to talk about images because images are boring and everybody's been talking about images for years. And I still, as a screen reader user, find unlabeled images all day long. Let's instead look at things where automatics can be helpful. You mentioned color, right? We can do some level of, we have a lot of trouble with one of our brand colors. Are we trying to use orange and white everywhere? Do we have something where the focus state is just undetectable? Do we have issues with headings throughout a site? You know, we have got big, bold text, but it's not actually coded as a heading. Those are the kind of things that we can use to be a barometer for what parts of our site and what kinds of things should we train our teams on. And then as an added bonus, we can start to break up that site and say, you know what, portion A of our website has a lot of issues in this way, but you know what, portion B, controlled by this other team, they don't have that problem. Let's get these two teams together and talk about why is that? What training did they do? What are the methods they're using? What's the content management system tool that they're using to make this work? It's not me, the accessibility police, coming in and saying, hey, you must do these things. And by the way, here's 1,000 issues in your Jira backlog. But it's saying from team 1 to team 2, having that conversation at a horizontal level in the organization to really equip people and to boost one another up.
That's very good. Using testing tools also as a kind of a training vehicle. I think that's a very good point. So if we turn to Hungary, if you could please present yourself. And I know you are one of the monitoring agencies that do not use automatic tools, if I remember this correctly. So what do you think? When and why would you ever recommend using automatic accessibility testing tools? And how do you do the testing in Hungary? That's very interesting.
Thank you very much, Susanna. My name is Zsanett, Ashu-Miskolczi. I know it's not easy to pronounce, but shortly, Zsanett. Yes, in Hungary recently, we don't use any automated test. It wasn't like that because at the beginning of our work 4 years ago, we also tried. As you mentioned, mostly also the European legislation mentions the automated tests with the connection of the simplified monitoring. Besides simplified monitoring, we also check websites in-depth methodology and also the mobile application. At the beginning, we used the automated test for simplified testing. But a few months after, we started getting tons of critics from the public sector bodies because of the outcome and the results were sent to them as a result of the monitoring were very difficult to interpret and understand by them. So we had to overview our methodology. And honestly, we also find it that it doesn't fit to the Hungarian condition because back then web accessibility were stepping in the baby shoes for 5 years ago, even at the public sector bodies. And we try to change it as not only a monitoring agency, but also kind of supportive agency for them. So we totally changed our methodology, and not because we got tons of critique, but we also found that 70–80% of the web accessibility errors were not revealed by the automated test. So as an only solution, only using automated test, even for simplified monitoring, wasn't the right path to follow. So we shut it down totally, and we established our own manual methodology based on the standards and the WCAG requirements.
That's quite impressive, and especially as you describe your own monitoring agency as, or your country as being in baby shoes for accessibility, then most of them would rely on something kind of the cheaper way, but you took the kind of the bold step of doing it manually instead. So that's very encouraging, I think, for the other member states. So my next question is, if a public sector body cannot do whatever perfect accessibility testing would be, but manual testing, user testing, automatic, whatever, but if that takes too much time, they don't have the resources, or they claim that they don't have the resources, what is the most efficient way for them to understand what activities to prioritize? I mean, Corbb, you said that testing tools can be used to training, but do you think they can also be used to highlight and prioritize, even if they don't test all of them? I mean, how's the balance there? What would you say to, I mean, now we're mostly talking public sector here, but they can be as big as your large clients, I think.
Absolutely, and sometimes bigger. I think the piece here to keep in mind is that it's less about the tool that you use and more about what you do with the data. So if you do a lot of manual testing and you get a lot of results, or you do a lot of automated testing, you get a lot of results, and you run a different automated test and you get different results, I think the goal is less to have a perfect test sample than it is to say, when we get these results, how are we working to prioritize them? How are we working to understand the impact to the user? And so a lot of times what we find is that, you know, a site that has lots and lots of articles, and we'll just keep it simple at that, right? We're going to find a lot of the same issues on every page. But what we step back and say, you know what, we don't need to look at all 80,000 pages of a site to understand its level of accessibility when 70,000 are the same bare bones, just with some different content. We can use that to say, do we have issues within our content management system? You know, are those issues than having somebody just go out and fix a component? Or are we maybe wanting to look at a key user flow? Should we say the goal of somebody who comes to our website is they need to apply for a passport. They need to find out when our office is open. They need to find out how this particular process works. They want to find out how to get tested for COVID. Then those steps, we might only have to look at 10 pages, maybe 15, maybe 20. We look at a few user flows that a real user is going to move through. And whether that's with manual testing or with automated testing, the goal is to keep the user front and center. And all that the automated tool is doing is trying to replicate that user experience to help us find that representative sample, to help us identify those high severity issues, and to really help us to fix our reused components. Beyond that, I think that's when we start to look at how can we maybe leverage other tools to go in and make, you know, whether it's a regular expression, today we call it AI, to go in and make those changes in the content itself.
I'll call you back when AI can do all of that, Corbb, but in principle, I agree.
Not there yet, but we could start.
Yes. So Malin is jumping in the chair to say something. So I'll let you go second. Yeah.
No, I wasn't jumping. I was just laughing about the AI because we heard that's the solution to everything ever. And I think it might be in the future, but we're not there yet. So right now we need to focus on what we can do here and now. And I agree with a lot that you said. I think focusing on the main things when you have a short budget is very important, but also not staring you blind if you tend to use an automatic tool and you get thousands of errors that you need to fix each one of them, because as we know, all automatic tools have false positives, as Susanna said. So all automatic tools says that something is wrong that really isn't wrong. And if you have a small budget as a monitor agency or a public sector body, and you spend time and effort and money of trying to fix something that actually isn't an accessibility barrier, then we forget about the end user, and we put our mind and effort in the wrong direction. So I think that's good to have in mind. And a solution, if you need to use automatic tools, then it would be to use kind of several automatic tools to try to filter out those false positives, so you get a more structured image on what you really need to fix. I think there are some extremely good usage when we use, as Corbb mentioned in the beginning, when we do it continuously and we don't accumulate those massive amounts of accessibility issues we need to fix in the backlog. Because if we fix them when they are fresh, they're actually more cheaper to fix, they are quicker to fix, and it's more easier to get a more inclusive web page in the end.
Thank you. And Zsanett, what would you recommend your public sector bodies if they come to you and say, we have no clue about accessibility, so we need to start figuring out what to do, and we need to have an accessibility statement, and please help us. What are the first steps? Would you then recommend them to use automatic tools, or would you recommend them not to use automatic tools because of your own decisions? Or how do you, I mean, what is the situation on the ground in the public sector bodies in Hungary?
Yes, because we also don't use automated tools. We are also not familiar which one would be the best for public sector bodies. But if you allow me, I would like to step back a little and describe shortly how things are going now with web accessibility in Hungary. Because the first thing, if a public sector body comes to me with that question, first of all, I'm really happy, because it means the public sector body knows something about web accessibility. But the sad truth is, even if it is a legal obligation, mostly they hear about web accessibility when they get a result from us with the list of the web accessibility failures and errors of their website or mobile application. So they even don't have accessibility statements. The last 2 years statistics shows that 70% of the public sector bodies in Hungary do not have accessibility statement, which is a very sad number. So when they get to know about their obligation, that yes, there is a web accessibility, they have to focus on it, and not because of it is a legal obligation, but because of the users, because they are the most important in this topic. Then mostly we give our results to them. It's a very good start for them, and we mostly advise them to ask a web accessibility expert for help, and it mostly helps, because with their own resources they are not able to make a website or a mobile application fully compliant.
So it seems like Hungary is a good place to be if you are an accessibility expert, but because you have a need for expertise on the ground.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So let's all go Hungary next year. And Corbb, I want to ask you about this. Malin has touched upon it a couple of times. So really, some results may not be perfect from tools, and then experts can disagree on kind of interpretation of the tools and so on. But I mean, you work both with the tool making and also consulting and supporting and training, and I mean everything. You're kind of a one-stop shop for accessibility. So how can we make sure that when clients measure things, or that we measure things, that we measure the right thing? I mean, how do we make sure that we keep the end user in focus? And I mean, you said all the right things, but how do we do that in reality? I mean, how does it work?
Sure. Yeah, I think so. The point that's been raised so far of using multiple tools is a really important one. Here in the States, a lot of times what we find is that people who are filing accessibility complaints are using an automated tool, and they're using, whether it's Wave or it's Axe or it's Equal Access, right? It doesn't, that particular engine, right? Our clients need to find a way to quickly get to those results. And so I think what our tool is doing is trying to bring in all those various rule sets. So our customers can say, hey, we love Axe, we like Wave, we think this is a better match for the type of website we have, for the type of testing we do. And so we allow you to just switch between those engines very quickly. But I think the other piece, and agnostic to what company you end up using, a lot of organizations say, well, it's really easy to set up automated testing. You type in your domain name and you hit crawl, and we go out and we crawl your entire website. And the issue becomes that those tools work okay until they hit something like a calendar, where there's an infinite number of pages that will go, that crawler can go through. It'll work fine until you hit a dynamic site where suddenly today different content's available than yesterday, and tomorrow some of those pages won't exist. And so while there's a time and a place to go out and crawl your entire ecosystem of web experience and see what is out there, really a lot of times it's about bringing that big sitemap down into focus. And whether or not you're looking at 10 pages or 20 pages, if you have 80,000 on your website, there's no need to crawl 80,000 pages. You could crawl maybe a few hundred and get that same data. Now, we give you the option to do that. If you want to go out and crawl that many tens of thousands of pages, our tools can handle it. WebAIM has shown we can crawl 1 million pages and get plenty of data. But the goal really is to say, what is it that's most important to us right now? And for a lot of our customers, they say, if we think of something as straightforward as a bank, just as an example, and recognize we're talking to public sector, but let's just look at private sector for a second. A bank has, let's say, lots of different product lines, lots of different customers they're serving. But if they find that the majority of the people that are frustrated by their current accessibility experience are their consumers, then going out and crawling their wealth management and their commercial banking and their small business banking and their credit card pages may not be very helpful to the end customer, who at the end of the day says, I want to be able to pay my loan. I want to be able to check my checking account balance. I want to apply for a checking account product. And that small team says, here's what we can do right now in the next quarter. We can focus on this set of pages. We're not going to maybe get them perfect. Not every tool is going to say 100%. Some of the 100% probably aren't accurate anyway, but let's go out and make them better. And next quarter, let's focus on a different portion, And that's really the only way that we've seen real success happen, is when we can really make that, just like when businesses go out, how do we identify that really small niche that's almost too small to really go out and fix to make a meaningful difference for users?
Okay, thank you, Corbb. And Zsanett, what would you say? How do we make sure that, or how do you make sure that the public sector bodies prioritize the right thing, that you measure the right thing, and that the public sector bodies really focus on the right thing? I mean, is there a combination of user testing or kind of end user involvement, or how do you make sure that it's really the right issues that are handled in the monitoring?
We don't have end user testing here in Hungary. We have two in-house experts, visually impaired. So with the screen readers testing, we can offer a good result about this kind of error of the website. But of course, I understand that maybe our methodology it's very, very unique, and it's not like we resist automated tests, but we haven't found the one yet we can trustfully can use. Of course, I agree with that the kind of combination of automated and manually testing would be the ideal one to solve the issue. But as I told you, here in Hungary, public sector bodies not that fighting against the web accessibility, that sometimes they are a bit lost if we are about this topic. But for example, we in our methodology, we also offer or provide them a consultation. So if they think they need more explanation about the result, about the errors, we provide them even an online consultation, so we can go through as a checklist and help them to understand the errors, and try to also offer a solution how to make it right and accessible.
It
I
sounds
think
like
you mentioned something
whole
that's super
accessibility.
important there.
Sorry, Corbb,
Go ahead.
please go ahead.
I think you mentioned something super important, Zsanett, though, and that is you're keeping the person with a disability at the center, right? You mentioned you have 2 low vision testers. And I think that's an important part of all of this, is that whether you're consulting with the community or you're bringing in a third party, really talking to people and with people with disabilities to say, what is it that's most important to you? You know, a lot of people think that images are most important to screen reader users. They're interesting to me, but ultimately, I don't really care that you have a really beautiful picture of somebody on your homepage. What I care about is getting that I need. And so that prioritization can come from your users and from those who already working with you that probably haven't had their voices heard in your surveys because those aren't accessible generally. And so consulting with them to say, hey, what is it that you expect from us? What is challenging today? What can we make better for you tomorrow?
That's very good, and I just felt that the whole evolution of accessibility in Hungary is on Zsanett's shoulders and her team and the 2 visually impaired people, because nobody else is doing the testing and nobody knows. So I feel with you, but I hope it will all end up in a good way. So I'll let Malin end up with something on the prioritization and how we make sure we do the right thing.
Yeah, I think I see a big risk in society today. We trust a lot in technology, and we tend to trust a lot in what the technology can do. We have been talking here today over and over again that there's not enough knowledge out there, but still we trust the automatic testing tools to give us the answer. And here I see a problem, because I've actually noticed this in real life, where the automatic tools tell something. The higher ups in the organization looks and say, we need a perfect score on these automatic tools. And the developers, not knowing exactly what to do, try to start fixing only the things that automatic tools kind of puts forward to get a perfect score. But we keep missing what a perfect score is, because that's not getting 100% in the automatic tool. It is creating a web page that's accessible for the end user. And as Susanna said, most of the automatic tools out there does only test for a few of the requirements, especially not all the requirements in the European standards. So we are missing loads of important requirements for loads of user groups. So I think my best tip is keep the eye on the ball, which is the end user, and create the best thing they can use and listen to what they needs to be fixed on the web page. That's the most important thing, I think.
Okay, thank you very much. And let's go to questions. Do we have any questions in the audience? Yes, we do. Some questions as well?
Yeah, thank you. In the past, someone told me like a fool with a tool is still a fool. And a tool is like like Word can do a lot of great things, but if you use it wrongly, it will never help you with like giving you solutions. What I see with automated testing is that you can identify a lot of issues, and it will be automatically have a list of all the issues described correctly with nice print screens and description how to fix them. And then if an expert is able to look at it and say, okay, let's fix these issues, it will save a lot of time reporting and a lot of time explaining what is expected. And I think with accessibility always that the knowledge, add a label to an image. Yeah, okay, great. Just add the name of the image as a label. That's you need to have the knowledge with a tool, without a tool, to fix things. So it's don't blame the tools, but you need to get knowledge. So that's not really a question, but
a one-liner for today. Yes, yeah, and a good one. So I think we have here. We have.
So it will be a question and a point of view. First, I would like to know if in the monitoring of the states, do they have to have a percentage of simplify and deep monitoring?
Yes.
And if it's about 5% or whatever. And I have the impression you were speaking about full and a tool. I have sometimes the impression that they are using the tool, like they know how to have 100% with the tool to look good and not to go further. Like I have 150 websites that have been tested with simplified, and they have 100, but they know how to do it with the tool and they don't want to go further. And I've seen that many times that then I contact them, I explain there is this that is problematic, and we don't have the budget, or it will cost too much, or it was not in the plan. So I have the impression that sometime to comply with Europe, they know how to play with the tool to do their best. So I would like to know.
So just to clarify, you are not talking about monitoring, you're talking about the public sector body doing the testing. So the organizations in scope of this, because the monitoring bodies, they are clearly not doing what you say they are doing. They are following the monitoring methodology, and the simplified methodology is for non-compliance, and the in-depth is for compliance. So I don't agree with you with if that is a question around the monitoring, but the public sector bodies may, of course, use a tool and say, hey, we are 100% or whatever, and then not move on, or use that to write in the accessibility statement that we have all of these issues and then just leave it like that. That is unfortunately happening for sure. So any comments on that, Zsanett? What is happening in Hungary when you tell the public sector bodies that they do have issues? How do they react?
They have 30 days to answer and send us the deadline, which the deadline is to repair or to make the websites more accessible.
And what if they say they don't have the resources, as Michael says that some organizations do? What would you do? You go hit them with something, or what do you do?
No, we can turn to the authorities, also to the upper bodies. But as for now, I've been working with accessibility nearly for 5 years. There was never like a good a reason we don't have the budget for that, because it's public sector bodies. If they have any services or they offers any kind of content to the citizens, I don't think they can cover themselves with that reason that sorry, we don't have money for that. Of course, we understand that it's sometimes they have a limited budget, and we also understand that from one day to another one they won't have a compliant website. But making the first steps, they have enough resources. And that's the most important, that they start making the first steps to improve and develop their websites and mobile applications.
Okay, thank you. So I
Here
think
in
also in
here
the
in the
review
States, we had.
sorry, Corbb, yes, please.
Sorry, there's a bit of a delay. Didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah.
So we here in the States about 6 years ago, we had a group, particularly one individual, who was filing complaints against every public school district and college in the country that she could find, saying their website was not accessible. And each time the Department of Education was required to investigate it, Of course, she was right, because every website has issues. And then they would send a letter, tell the school what they needed to do. The school would write back and say, okay, fine, we'll work on it. And they would enter into this consent decree. And this, I mean, there were hundreds of these done in 2 years. And these would institute monitoring, and they would say, we're going to do testing, and we're going to have a plan for our new content. And by and large, most of these schools have the same issues today that they had 6 years ago. And so within a couple of years, one of the things that that agency did is they said, let's not be the ones who are going to take each university out back and hit them over the head with a board, but let's invite them into dinner and have a conversation and say, you know what, it sounds like you don't have the knowledge. I have a library over here. It sounds like you don't have access to experts. I've got a couple over here. It sounds like you don't really understand the reason. Let's talk. And at first I was very skeptical. Like, oh man, we have lost all authority, all power. We had this great thing going. Everybody was finally getting held accountable. And what we found is that being held accountable meant that a bunch of your people at an organization spent a lot of time fighting with lawyers, writing a lot of documents that ultimately went nowhere. But when we start to bring people in and we show them the value of accessibility, and we say, you have a lot of things that are broken. We could go fix all that stuff that you're probably going to get rid of in the next 2 to 3 years anyway. Or let me teach you a new way of working. In the example, let me teach you to use Microsoft Word to write documents and Microsoft Excel to write spreadsheets, and not use Excel for desktop publishing and Word for numbers, right? Like, let's use the right tool for the right output. Let's teach you the right ways to use it. Let's create things that are more accessible for the end user. And I think that here in Europe, we have the opportunity to have that enforcement. It's important that people know that if they don't do this right, we do have the board in our hand. But in the other hand, we also have the opportunity to shake their hand for an invitation to have this conversation, to showcase the importance. And that importance is a lot of times as user what we come to. And we say to a customer, that's great, I'm glad you're using automated tools. I am a customer. I am trying to do this thing. I am trying to file my taxes. I'm trying to pay this fee, and I can't do it. You are making it hard on me. Those public sector bodies they're in the business of serving their residents. They want to be a positive experience. They're not creating an experience. That's where we can really partner together.
Yes, and according to the legislation, the monitoring agencies are not only policing, but also really supporting and facilitating and training, and that's also what happens in the member states. So do we have another question, or should I take one from, we have another one in the back, yes.
I have a question about false flags, because I think we talk a lot about identifying and knowing how to interpret the issues, but I think every tool has problem of flagging things that are not really a problem. And if you want a perfect score, then you are just fixing something that is not an issue. So how you actually teach people to identify this, but also consider this if you are using automation tools to audit or to score the conformance of a website.
Do you want to have a go on that, Malin?
As we said here, it's a lot about knowledge, and the knowledge isn't really where we want it to be all the time. I worked together with one public sector that had an automatic tool, and it had apparently given them a warning that it didn't have alternative texts, as it said. So they tried to fix it with a script, adding the same alternative text to all images on the site. This is actually not an improvement in any possible way, but the automatic tools didn't give the warning or the error anymore. So they were very happy. The higher ups in the organization was very happy, but they didn't solve anything at all. And we can laugh at it here because we have the knowledge, but there are so many that doesn't. So yeah, that's an issue. And I'm back to what Shipri say. We need to add this to more education. We need to demand that accessibility and how to create, if you are a developer, a designer, UX design, whatever role you have, what should you do to create web experience or app experience? We need to demand that it comes into education because we can't reach everyone with, and unfortunately, even how good the automatic tools is and they have an explanation, we know a lot of users do not read the content of a warning. They just accept that's a warning and they try to fix it. That's the harsh truth.
I can imagine Corbb wants to chime in on this one.
Well, I never miss a question that I want to chime in on, Susanna. I think the opportunity here is for the tool manufacturers to really think about adult learning theory. So one piece that we've really embraced here at Level Access is to say, telling you what the issue is interesting, but the one thing that is important where you're going to actually get change is not to sit you down for a 90-minute course once a year, or to send you through a 60-minute course 3 times a year. The goal really, because we know you're going to forget 75% of what you learn within a week if that's all we do. If from this event today, all you do is take great notes and go home, a week from now, you will forget 75% of what you've learned. And that gets worse as time goes on. But if instead we beat that forgetting curve by bringing just-in-time learning, if we say this is a warning means this might not be an issue. A warning means this might need additional investigation. This is an issue that impacts users. Here's how. Here are not just one solution. Don't just add a text alternative to this page, right, with a script, but here are meaningful ways to add that, not just to say alt equals, aria label equals, but to really go a step further and say, we can tell from, maybe we know how your site is built, right? We can use tools like built with, we can use that fancy 2-letter acronym that Susanna loves, AI, to tell you what your site's built with and say, in your system, here's how to go about making this change. Here's how other customers we know have made this change at a systemic level, so that there's a difference between the jewelry shop around the corner and how they add alternative text, and the Fortune 5 company down the street and the government agency down the highway, how they're going to make those changes and really contextualize it for people. It's incumbent on us as folks who make automated tools to teach people how to not be fools and how to make them better users of our tools and of just education and accessibility in general.
Seems like every session today ends up with somebody being trained. So anyone selling training is in a good business position as well. So I have a question. We have a question from online, which is, why doesn't the monitoring have to include user testing? That is kind of a tricky question because it's more to the legislator, but I don't know if you want to say something about that, Zsanett, or have a
Yes.
reflection on it.
Yes, as you mentioned, we have also, I cannot say the legal barrier, but the legal frame, what to do, how to check in Hungary. And honestly said, here in Hungary, end user testing is not common, it's not known. And we have also, of course, a good relation to the representatives of disabled forums and representatives, and they are our base if it comes about any question of web accessibility from their perspective. So we can turn to them, but we also don't use end user tests in Hungary.
So I cannot answer why it's not included because I'm not the legislator, but I can respond to how the negotiation process was and in the transposition and during the discussions with the member states and so on. And I know that in the expert group that I led when we developed the monitoring methodology, we were very careful not to be too prescriptive. So we didn't want to say, do this, do that. We wanted to leave room for innovation. And for the Commission, it was also important to leave room for use of automated tools, which our group was more reluctant to write in. But it's actually written in the implementing acts that you can use automatic tools, but nowhere have we gotten the users in, except for in the directive where it says that in the preparation of selection of websites and so on, then the monitoring agency need to reach out to the end user groups, but there is no real connection to end user testing, unfortunately. So with that, I think we have to close this session because we are moving into the last session of today. Thank you very much, Corbb, for being with us. Good to see you again. It was nice to see you in the US last time, and now you're almost here, it feels like. And Zsanett, thank you very much for coming not to to Brussels, but for being here with us. And next time I promise to practice on your name. And Malin for just being here as usual. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.